Donald Trump is hiding, Donald Trump is lying, and Donald Trump is covering up every bit of evidence he possibly can surrounding his Jeffrey Epstein scandal. And the DOJ is doing his bidding in doing so. While Pam Bondi claims she's working tirelessly to get more evidence released, the opposite is actually the case because a Democrat in the Senate just went public with how much evidence is actually being withheld, actually being hidden, actually being kept secret. And we are going to get into it all. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button because it goes a long way in supporting our work. Now, before we get into Senator Ron Wyden, who went public with this hidden information, I want to start with an update from CNN about what Donald Trump's calls for the grand jury in the Jeffrey Epstein case to release documents actually means, because it's not what he wants you to think.
And Paula, I hate to do this live on the air. Do you have anything you can share with us?
It's my job, Jake, and
okay.
I'm all over it. All right, so we were wondering, what would they argue? How are they going to convince this judge to release this confidential information, especially because, let's be honest here, their real motivation here is that they are facing a political firestorm and need to make it look like they are making an effort towards transparency. So what they're arguing here is that this is in the public interest to release some of this. Now, the framing is interesting because they're saying since they released that memo on July 6th, discussing the fact that they had done a review, that they were not going to release additional information, that there has been, quote, extensive public interest in the basis for this. And they're saying that they will continue to not release the information that they have and have the power to release. But they're saying that transparency to the American public is of the utmost importance to this administration. And given that, they're asking the court to unseal underlying grand jury transcripts subject to appropriate redactions to protect victims. They say that the department will work with the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District to make appropriate redactions. So they are basing this, arguing that this is all in the public interest and a need for transparency. This is a long shot. The judge is going to have to take some time here. We'll likely have other stakeholders, victims, accusers weigh in on the potential impact of this. And again, a grand jury, that's where you go to seek an indictment. It's a much lower bar than it would be for a conviction. So you present some evidence, but not all of your evidence. And so what will remain here, the question that will remain, even if the judge agrees to release some of this, is the fact that the bulk of the evidence is with the Justice Department and with the FBI, and they are not releasing that. So
we said this last night, and it is true today. Donald Trump is putting on a show. He's not calling for documents to actually be released because he wants them to be. He's doing it because he knows that they won't be, that there will not be new evidence presented if this judge actually does let new documentation come forward, and nothing will be politically damaging to him. But there is still mountains of evidence that is, and the DOJ is overseeing all of it and refuses to let it go. Specifically because they hired people to make sure it couldn't, and it's important to note that before we get into what this Democratic senator had to say. According to information my office received, writing Dick Durbin, you then pressured the FBI to put out approximately 1,000 personnel in its information management division, including the record information dissemination section, which handles all requests submitted by the public under the Freedom of Information Act and Privacy Act, on 24-hour shifts to review approximately 100,000 Epstein-related records in order to produce more documents that could then be released on an arbitrary short deadline. Durbin's office was told that these personnel were instructed to flag any records in which President Trump was mentioned. Notably, in 2002, Mr. Trump said of Epstein, "I've known Jeff for a long time, 15 years, terrific guy. He's a ton of fun to be with." It's even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do. Just yesterday, it was reported that the department previously reviewed a leather-bound album comprised of dozens of letters from Mr. Epstein's friends in celebration of his 50th birthday party. So at one time, the DOJ had access to the letter that was the reason for the bombshell story in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. But it doesn't stop there, because it's not the only evidence that the DOJ was sitting on, because they currently are. They're hiding it, they're covering it up, and Senator Ron Wyden went public with it all. 4,000 potential lines of investigation. Top Democrat claims Trump admin is sitting on key evidence in Epstein.
Now, somewhere in the Treasury Department, Mr. President, locked away in a cabinet drawer, is a big Epstein file that's full of actionable information. Follow the money details about his financing and operations that await investigation. Last year, the Biden administration allowed our investigators to look at portions of the file. We did that at the Treasury building. Here is what it says. Treasury's Epstein file details, Mr. President, 4,725 wire transfers. Let me repeat that. 4,725 wire transfers, adding up to nearly $1.1 billion flowing in and out of just one of Mr. Epstein's bank accounts. If you ask me, that is more than 4,000 potential lines of investigation right there. Hundreds of millions more flowed through other accounts. That's even a lot more to investigate. The file shows that Mr. Epstein used multiple Russian banks, which are now under sanctions, to process payments related to sex trafficking. A lot of the women and girls he targeted came from Russia, Belarus, Turkey, and elsewhere. One shudders to think about the kinds of people who must have been involved in trafficking these women and young girls out of those companies and into the Epstein web of abuse. Again, these are all potential leads, Mr. President, the Department of Justice ought to be digging into. This is about years and years of international sex trafficking. None of this is a hoax. None of it is a scam. And I'd like to say I consider it insulting to the intelligence of the American people for the Trump administration to simply say there is nothing to investigate here. Now, when the Trump administration came in with a lot of fanfare about transparency and openness, I said, I'm going to follow up on that. So I wrote to the Attorney General, Ms. Bondi, Treasury Secretary Bessent, FBI Director Patel, and I asked them all to produce the Epstein file to the Senate Finance Committee so it could be reviewed. In fact, I've made that request multiple times. The Trump commitment to transparency, based on the response, didn't mean a whole lot because they just refused. Here's what one Treasury official wrote back to me. I'll quote here. The Department of Treasury has previously made documents available relating to the matter in response to your inquiries. Accordingly, we understand that you have the information you seek from the Treasury related to this request. We thank you for your attention to this important issue. Mr. President, for anybody who's familiar with how these discussions go in Washington, D.C., what I just read was code for the bureaucracy saying, you're asking for information, go pound sand. The Trump administration may be trying to close the books on the Epstein sex trafficking, but I want it understood as a senior member of the Senate Finance Committee, where we spend a lot of time looking at where substantial sums of money are going, particularly if they may be promoting wrongdoing and helping to evade taxes. We are going to stay on this fight to hold the wealthy individuals accountable for the harm that they clearly were involved in injuring the young women and others in this sex trafficking. So I'm going to have more follow-up for Attorney General Bondi very quickly. As for today, Mr. President, if she doesn't want to do the investigating, doesn't want the DOJ to do it, let me just restate my original demand. have that Treasury information given to the Senate Finance Committee and have us on a bipartisan basis do our work. That's what we do in important investigations. If the Trump people believe they need additional authority to carry out the requests that I make again this afternoon, let me offer to help them write the bill myself. The idea that there is nothing more to investigate, not when you have 4,000 wire transfers, many of them associated with the possibility of wrongdoing and sex traffic promoting. The idea that you have that and there's nothing to investigate when it comes to the Epstein sex trafficking operation is ridiculous. Pam Bondi was the Attorney General in the state of Florida, where a lot of the Epstein crimes were committed. The Attorney General ought to know better, of all people.
They are sitting on links that could potentially put a broader story, a broader narrative, could give a clearer vision of what is happening in this Epstein scandal, and they refuse to. They refuse. You've even seen MAGA influencers who kind of want to stay close to the administration and do their bidding suggest that it would be smart for Donald Trump to make public who those on the same cell block as Jeffrey Epstein were. You've just got to get those little breadcrumbs of information to kind of cover his bases. But they refuse to do even that. And what Ron Wyden said about these bank accounts, these transactions, those are leads. That's more possible information that could lead to a greater investigation, which Republicans are blocking. They are blocking any more investigation from happening. They are covering up evidence, not only linking Donald Trump, and this is important. They are not just covering for Trump. They are covering for the other associates involved. Of course, they are specifically flagging anything that has to do with Donald Trump, but knowing how closely involved he clearly was, they understand that any links to Epstein could potentially come back to hurt Donald Trump, and so they are covering for all of these criminals. That is what's happening. It is important to note this is not just about Donald Trump, but inadvertently protecting those who associated with him and Epstein because they know it'll get back to Trump. That is disgusting. And we are going to continue to call it out on this show. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video. And if you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.